part of the pro-life movement that we were in was called the rescue movement that was birthed in the late 80s into the early years of the 90s. Christians would go to the abortion clinic on the day of the abortions, and they would sit in front of the doors and sing and pray. They couldn't get in. So basically the clinic was closed if we were there. When we first did that, women couldn't get in, and then we had counselors looking for women. They could see the women that were coming, and they would go up and talk to them, and some of them would say, I didn't want to do this anyway, and they chose life for their child. And as a result, you're trespassing, and as a result of that, you have a penalty of a day in jail or a couple of days in jail or a longer term.
Every time I turn on my phone or the TV, it feels like the world's falling apart. The news is full of chaos, and if that's all you ever see, it's easy to believe everything's just getting worse. But that's not what I'm seeing behind the scenes. In real life, in our communities, I'm watching God move like I've never seen before. I've seen lives restored, churches growing, revival happening at business events, people stepping out in faith, and God giving dreams and visions, calling people to rise up and make a difference. And that's why I started Transforming Communities, because I want to show you what God is actually doing right now. I want to introduce you to my friends, people who are stepping up, taking risks, and transforming their cities for the kingdom. So if you're tired of bad news and you've been wondering if God still moves, He does, and these stories prove it. To support what we're doing and to hear more stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be notified every time a new podcast drops, just click the bell icon next to the subscribe button. With that being said, let's jump into the Transforming Communities podcast. This episode is brought to you by Helping Captives. You know, it's crazy how many people don't realize that human trafficking isn't just somewhere else. It happens right here in our own communities. Helping Captives is a faith-based anti-trafficking organization that exists to provide freedom, hope, and opportunity to survivors of sex trafficking across the United States. They do this through their different services such as emergency and stabilization, 24/7 around-the-clock care, professional counseling, and much more. If you're a survivor of sex trafficking and need help, or you're wanting to support a survivor's journey, take the first step at helpingcaptives.org. That's helpingcaptives.org. Today's guest is someone who is not just a friend, but someone I deeply respect and look up to. Jim Anderson was one of the first people I ever heard speak when I began attending youth ministry. I still remember the message clearly. It was a call to live pure and holy and to truly understand the heart of a woman. That message stayed with me, and over time, I realized just how much it shaped the way I approach relationships, faith, and eventually my marriage. Jim did not just speak truth from a stage, he lived it every single day of his life. And my wife actually lived with Jim and his family, and Jim walked closely with us through our dating relationship before we were married. He helped us build a strong, healthy foundation going into marriage, and I will always be grateful for that investment in our lives. Jim is the author of Unmasked, and he's the founder of Sexuality Unmasked, a nonprofit that boldly shares the gospel while also bringing healing and restoration to people coming out of sexual trauma. Additionally, he's also one of the forerunners in the pro-life movement. Jim is a man of integrity, conviction, and compassion. He's a hero to many people across our country, and he has faithfully served for decades with humility and courage. It is truly an honor to introduce you to my friend, Jim Anderson. All right, Papa Jim, you're in the house. One of my literally favorite people of all time.
Here we are.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you, it's funny, my first time meeting you was very interesting. And it wasn't even you, it was your book. And I came to Victory Faith, kind of rough around the edges, high school kid, kind of a player, the whole deal. My whole identity was really in getting with girls. And so I show up to youth group and Pastor Trevor's there and rededicate my life to the Lord. And first thing Trevor tells me is he goes, hey, I want you to go home and I want you to read this book. And this book said The Heart of a Woman on it. And he said, you're not allowed back into my youth ministry until you read this book. And then surprisingly, you came and spoke the next week at youth group. So you were my second message that I ever heard at Victory Faith as a young kid in high school. And I had just read your book. And it really affected me. But essentially, it was very wise of Trevor, but it also just put me into
a situation of understanding that I really had to understand the heart of a daughter, and that, my role here wasn't to find a girlfriend. My role here was to really figure out who God was calling me to and learn how to hear God's voice. And essentially reading that book kind of took me down a different path, and eventually would try to date here and there, but always kind of feel convicted because I realized they weren't my wife. And so the relationship never lasted. And eventually I just said, I'm not going to date again until I find my wife. And then when I did, she was living at your house. And so we walked through quite the process of learning what it meant to be a man, learning what it meant to have a healthy relationship. And so I want to dive into that later on in the podcast, but I really want to start off with just trying to hear from you about, taking us back to your childhood and understanding your early childhood upbringing, and share how God really kind of shaped your heart and eventually called you into ministry.
Mm-hmm. My early childhood,
and also we'll pull the mic up closer to your
right.
mouth.
How's that doing?
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I usually tell people that we came out of a kind of a broken family, which impacted me a lot. My mom was, when I talk about my mom was pretty broken. She was kind of a functional alcoholic, and I tell people, well, I have an alcoholic mom and a dad who never said, I'm proud of you. And a mom for a son is an important person. She's supposed to give a young man a sample of femininity without sexuality. Like, it's this first close exposure to the other sex, and it's your mom. And when your mom's broken, that sample or taste of femininity without sexuality, that opportunity doesn't present itself really. And as a result, for me, girlfriends and pornography became really important to me, I think, as a result of that. And the absence of my mom's kind of nurture and what I was supposed to really receive from her. So that was that. And then the conflict with my father was just created a tension in my life where there was just tension over so many different things, and it was just kind of a negative family upbringing from that.
So how do you find Christ in all of that?
Well, there was seeds sown in my life. There's different ministries and people that prayed for me, but God's seed goes in and it doesn't go away. And I had some exposure in a ministry called Young Life, and it was really, that seed was all in me. I went off to college after leaving high school, and I'm smoking pot and popping pills still. But I get to college and I don't know why, for some reason I decided to go through Rush and become part of a fraternity. And mainly because my dad was in a fraternity. I mean, here my dad and I don't get along, but he still influences me because he was in a fraternity. I thought, well, maybe I'll just do what my dad did, And so I ended up visiting this one fraternity, and they give you a tour of the house, and up on the third floor of the fraternity there was a room where there was a picture of Jesus on the wall. And I was very vulnerable at that point, looking for someone to follow. If someone would pay attention to me, I'll follow you. I'm a candidate for whatever you want to train me in. I mean, I was vulnerable as a young man. I think young people are really vulnerable. They're in formative stage at that. And so the guy that owned the picture of Jesus lived in that fraternity, and I said, can I meet the guy that owns that? Does the guy that owned that picture does he live in this fraternity? And I want to meet him. And when I saw the picture of Jesus, a couple things happened in my spirit. And because of the seed of the message of Christ that was in me, there was as soon as I saw that picture hanging on the wall, there was part of me that said, I think I want to be a Christian. And the other part of me was saying, I'm tired of feeling guilty. Those are the two things that were kind of simultaneously hitting me in my spirit. And I'm tired of feeling guilty, and I think I want to be a Christian. And I don't know why I was thinking that, or it doesn't make any sense why I would even think those things. But that's what God was doing. He was stirring in my heart and drawing me. And this young man who owned the picture, he was part of a group of young men who were very committed to the Lord, unapologetic. It was very attractive to me. They were unashamed. And there was something in me that was really attracted to that. Like these young guys are committed to God, and they are not apologetic, and they don't care what anybody thinks. That was so nice, because I was so preoccupied, like so many young people, with what people think of me. It was all about what people think of you and not being embarrassed. And you spend your whole life trying to, be popular or whatever. And these guys, they had an attraction to them that was connected to their pursuit of God. And I thought, I want to be part of that. So they took me under their wing. They took me under the wing, and I ended up being the roommate with that guy that year in the fraternity, and I met his friends who were living off campus in another house and having Bible studies in living rooms. And it was a kind of an adventure where God began to deal with me and alter me, change me.
So this is from just timing, I'm looking back on it, is this kind of like the Jesus People movement, the 70s, people are radically getting on fire for the Lord. So these young guys are just so passionate about God, they're putting up Jesus photos in a fraternity, and they're just boldly passionate about it, and they don't even care. So Jim Anderson walks into the fraternity, and immediately you're bombarded by guys in the fraternity that want to have Bible study with you.
Yeah, I mean, they took me under the wing, and the year before there had been a move of God on the campus, and in the basement of the fraternity there was Christian rock bands instead of keggers, and
wow,
a number of young people got saved, and that was still they returned to campus the next fall, and they're all there's spiritual activity going on, and besides that there was a church about a half an hour from campus that was having what they call a Saturday night young people's meeting, where about 500 young people would show up every Saturday night, and there'd be worship and a message, and it was very exciting. We didn't know what was going to happen. That was very formative for us. We loved going there, loved meeting friends from all around the city. It was sort of a citywide meeting that God just used for years. And
I've seen pictures. You had like a truck. You kind of look like a hippie, and then you had like Jesus painted on the side of your truck. So, what part of this? It sounds like you guys just automatically went into this with a boldness to share the faith. How important do you think boldness is with reaching people with the gospel?
Well, it was a natural enthusiasm. I think for me, it was just an identification where I didn't care what people thought of me anymore. It was very freeing to finally be free from the horrible peer pressure of what do people think of me, and that's what got broken. I was a chameleon in high school. I would, I'd smoke pot on Thursday night, drink beer on Friday night, and go to the Bible study on Monday night. So it was like three sets of friends, and you're always changing friends, and you're a chameleon. You're changing colors so you don't get eaten alive by your peers. And so many young people are like that.
I can relate to that.
I mean, that's how people are. They just like whatever it takes to be accepted. So you're changing colors, and you're changing who you are from each group to group. And when God apprehended me in what was at the time I thought a total commitment, which you give as much as you know of yourself to as much as you know of God, and that can change. That's going to change over time because you're going to get to know God better and better. But when God broke the chameleon spirit in me, it was a freedom that was wonderful, just tremendous. Like I don't have to care about what anybody thinks anymore. It was amazing.
Wow. So you go from that, and it sounds like you just, from our conversations, you just get on fire for the Lord, and you kind of end up doing more like urban outreach ministry.
Well,
Is that correct?
It was funny. I ended up living next door to a black family, and we became like an older brother. I became like an older brother to these kids. There was a mom with 7 kids. And
Right next door to the fraternity?
Right next door to the house, off-campus house that I ended up living in the next year.
Oh, okay.
And we ended up doing stuff with the kids, and I'd take them to the laundromat with me and to the grocery store, and we'd throw the football in the street. And so they became kind of an appendage to my life, almost like whenever I'm doing something, they're just coming along with me. And that began to give me kind of exposure to that scenario of the black community. I grew up in white Spokane, so it wasn't like I didn't know anything about urban anything.
Got it.
And that was an introduction for me to see a mom who was a security guard trying to raise, 7 boys, and it was a great time getting to know that family and relating to them and just doing stuff with kids, feeling like I could just be who I was and be interested in them like a big brother and take them with me and have them be in the truck and, have them be in our living room when we're doing Bible studies and just influencing young men that don't have a mentor or a father figure.
And that was their situation.
That's what started. Yeah, that kind of started that. So that planted the seed, and I took some classes at the school about black literature and the sociology and politics of black power, kind of these different subject matters that took me further into the black culture. And I just continued to have an interest and ended up graduating college as a teacher, elementary school teacher, and got a job teaching in a 3rd grade teacher in the urban setting. So I taught 3rd grade in a classroom that had these federal mandates, like 50% minority, 50% single family, and 75% welfare.
Oh, wow.
So you have the classroom I had to
Where's this at? What state and city?
This is in Tacoma, Washington.
Tacoma, Washington, okay.
So you have to have 50% minorities, 50% single family, and then 75% welfare. So low income, minority, and broken family were the demographics of the kids I had.
Yeah.
And that's what God began to deal with my heart. And just being around them, I started seeing patterns in their life. I thought, Lord, you're the one that can break the patterns. You can break the patterns of fatherlessness and what I was seeing at the time. And that precipitated God dealing with me and then calling me into an outreach, an urban outreach, where I worked with minority, low-income black and white teenagers in Tacoma.
Yeah,
so I did
that was just kind of your heart for a long time.
7 years. Yeah, I did it for 7 years.
Yeah.
Lived in the black community and really burned out. I mean, I gave it my all to the point where I was burned myself out completely.
Really?
Huh?
Really?
Yeah, it's easy to do. You're called to something. The interesting, when you're young and you have a calling from God, it's very difficult to understand the broad nature of God's church and the calling, how broad the task of the church is. And it's so easy to think what you're called to is the most important thing that God's asked people to do.
Yeah.
And you become you're very thrilled about people that want to help you, and you're kind of insecure, and you end up kind of being negative about people that aren't for you. It's like if they're for you, you like them. If they aren't for you, you don't like them. And you develop kind of a competitive nature, and your identity gets wrapped up in what God's called you to do. And there's something partially correct about that, where God calls you, and part of your identity is that calling, but it should flow from a relationship with the Lord, and you have to be really careful not to let what you end up doing be your identity. And that happened to me. That became my identity, and I kind of rose and fall with the quote success of what I was trying to do, and ended up becoming pretty angry. I became angry with my first church and my pastor because I didn't feel like they were supporting me enough. God had called me, and I was doing the most important thing the church could do because I was involved in it. This is my ministry, and this is one of the most important things the church is doing. And your job as a pastor should be get everybody to do what I'm doing. That was really my attitude. I felt that, and I walked in that manner and had that attitude. And the result of such a posture is that there's going to be disappointment. Everybody isn't going to be doing what you're doing, and the pastor isn't going to be having a parade for you every week, telling everybody how wonderful what you're doing is. He doesn't have a parade every week. He's not going to mention your name from the pulpit every week. He may really appreciate what you're doing and understand it's part of the work of the church, but he doesn't see what you're doing in the same way you see what you're doing. And you probably don't see what he's doing in the same way he sees what he's doing. I'm thinking his job is to make me successful. And I really failed at that. I got embittered, which caused great, severe depression in my life. And what I was doing is I was trying to reach the world for Christ without reaching myself for Christ. Wow. There's a lot of people that try to, I'm going to be the answer, but how about reaching yourself first and having God work in your life so what you're representing is a message as well as what you're doing. How you're doing what you're doing is a message as well as what you're doing. Where you become the message, you're embodying. Christ is incarnated in you. It's not just your message and what you're saying or even what you're doing, but who you are. And I really failed in that. I got angry. I got disappointed, which led to anger, which led to bitterness, which led to eventually a hatred. It's what they call the root of bitterness in Scripture, and I ended up having an anger and a hatred toward my pastor and toward my church because they were already very supportive, but it's never enough. Once you're operating out of pride and out of that disappointment, based on self-centeredness, nothing can ever satisfy you. It doesn't matter how much anybody does for you; it's never going to be enough, and you're never satisfied. And you're on this treadmill that never is going to. So the church was a great church. Pastor Shackett was a great man, but I had such a high level of expectation for him to help me and do things for me. And he cared about me and was proud of me, but I just developed a root of bitterness and anger. I got severely depressed. Ended up going to a Christian psychiatrist twice a week for a year and a half.
How old are you at this point?
I'm in my mid-20s.
Wow. Are you married at this point?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not married at this point. I'm in the middle. I ended up getting married during this period of time. Crazy. And even after I was married, I was still dealing with it. It got worse. It got so bad I had to leave the ministry that I was in.
I wonder if that, from somebody that has more of a ministry that's like outside the walls of the church, and I see you connecting a lot of times with guys that have ministries that might not be, a pastoral role at a local church. And I've always wondered why you love to connect with us and talk with us and see how we're really doing and ask the hard questions. And I'm wondering is that part of the reason why?
Yeah, I think there's, if you don't resolve that, if you don't resolve your view your ecclesiology or your view of the church and how what you're doing fits into that, you're going to set yourself up for most probably for disappointment and criticism. You know, I think that's one of the greatest things you have to do is steward your own spirit. You know, I mean, to take care of your heart and your spirit when you're doing the ministry. You know, I mean, so our heart and our attitude and spirit is gives glory to God as an advertisement for the kingdom of God. We don't just do ministry, but it's who we are and how we operate and how we interact with people. And I didn't want young men to repeat what I did and take up an offense that would derail them in what they were called to do.
I've noticed that there's so much that I've noticed just being around you, but I've noticed specifically your heart for family, specifically your heart for young people. You've spent years and years going into discipleship schools, taking days with them to really get to core wounds so that they can be healthy before they even start the trajectory of having a platform. Let's focus on your character and who you are. And it seems to me, just in hearing this, it starts to make more sense because you deeply care. We've had hard conversations. I specifically remember in my early 20s where I'm going, but the Lord called me to this. I don't see the church necessarily as a shepherd sees sheep. I see them more as like an army, and I'm going, hey, get out of the building and let's go help take on the community, and having to figure out a balance of that so I'm not getting frustrated and irritated. And having somebody that's wiser to speak into that and see that, to make sure that I don't get burned out or I don't get angry or I don't end up in depression. I'm just thankful that you cared enough to be able to have those conversations with me and with other guys. And, you know, I've always been curious though. I've wondered what was the transition for you, because you've always had a heart for, like when I started doing ministry, I started a young adult house that mentored young guys, and you always were very supportive of that. But typically, if somebody knows you, they're going to know you as the guy that has lots of kids, that really wants men to understand the heart of a woman. And I'm so curious, where does that happen? I know you had a trip to Russia that kind of changed your life, but where was that transition? It's not like that ever went away. It's not that you don't have a heart for evangelism and street ministry and all that, but it was almost like God planted and like anointed you with a very specific message that kind of shifted the trajectory of your life.
Right.
When did that happen, and what was that?
Well, I went from the urban work to 7 years of being restored, where I was placed in a church by the Lord and had to learn how to have a pastor and learn how to love the church and learn how to love the people in the church without judging them and thinking I was better than they were because I was doing these wonderful things. I had a very elitist spirit, and it took a while for God to alter my heart, and He was dealing with my character and my attitudes. And at the end of that period of time, I remember the Lord speaking about He began to speak with me about the unborn. I was hearing things on the radio and looking at our country and hearing messages about the shedding of innocent blood and how a nation that allows the shedding of innocent blood is going to incur the judgment of God. And out of that, there was a drawing to the pro-life movement. I remember hearing about an event in New York and felt like the Lord told me to go to that. So I talked with my pastor about it, and I didn't, I'm trying to cultivate the positive interaction with my spiritual leadership. This is the second chance I have to try to do this right. So I'm saying, I want your blessing. You don't need to send me as a church, but I'd like to know what you think. I'm thinking about doing this. It wasn't like I'm expecting him to make decisions for me, but just I wanted godly counsel. Like, what do you think of? I feel like I'm I want to go to this. Will you pray with me about it? And, you know, it was about a mission, this kind of event in New York. And I remember praying about it for a month and got back together. And my pastor said, we're going to send you as a church. We want to send you, and we want you to go and see if the Lord's Spirit is in this movement that was being raised up in America to stand for the unborn, to speak for the defenseless that couldn't speak for themselves, and the mothers who are being taken advantage of, this kind of a sexualized, money-driven culture. And so he said, we're going to send
late
you.
80s?
Huh?
Like late 80s?
1989. He said, we're going to send you to New York. We're going to pay for your plane and your meals. You go and let us know whether God is in this movement or not. Go and be a spy like the spies that went into Canaan. Go and tell us whether God is in this or not. Give us your report. So I went, and that was an amazing time of God speaking to me, and he catapulted me into this other arena. And it was as much about my concern for our country as it was about the unborn children, which sounds kind of heartless, but it was about our country too, in a church that's silent in an area that should be saying something, and the silence of the church. And the church is supposed to be a prophetic voice to a culture, and to remind the culture, to remind the nation of its responsibility to protect life and defend the most vulnerable citizens. You know, if you put at risk the life of the most vulnerable citizen, you put at risk the life of every citizen, because all of a sudden the life of that citizen is evaluated by such arbitrary means. Like, well, so defending life became really important, and important for a country to really do that. And so we went to this event, and the Lord really called me again. He broke my heart about this issue and called me into the pro-life movement, which was different than the urban work I'd been involved in. But and then it probably really became super clarified. I mean, when we started working in the pro-life movement, I could see there's lots of issues around abortion, and there's a context for abortion. And the Lord started speaking to me pretty clearly. One of the things he said fairly early on, I was thinking, and he said, abortion is the end of a conveyor belt in a culture that worships sex. Mm-hmm. So you have this conveyor belt, the culture represented by a conveyor belt, you know, that abortion is the conveyor belt where people get plopped on the conveyor belt, and its conveyor belt moves and it goes down, and whatever's on the belt falls into it like a pit. So abortion is a conveyor belt in a culture that worships sex. So there's this mechanism where people are put on this conveyor belt and they end up in a pit because of this situation they find themselves in. And in other words, there's a context. You know, the context is there's sexual activity that necessitates abortion and necessitates this whole thing and the justification for it, and the obvious fallout. There's great damage to the men, the women, and obviously the children in this situation. And
I've utilized that in conversations of sex trafficking as well. And that came from you, as like realizing like abortion, and I would even say sex trafficking is the end of a conveyor belt of a nation that worships sex.
It's one of the end results.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then the other thing that was really, as I began to think about, I kept thinking the church is so good about taking some issue and kind of put it into an ideological ghetto, kind of like, okay, we have abortion, so we're going to start a crisis pregnancy center, and that solves it. We did something, and we put a ribbon on that, and we say we did it. And it doesn't keep it in the context, the larger context. That with a crisis pregnancy center, you're attempting to rescue women from a decision that's going to be very negative. The life of the child is at stake. Her future is at stake. But there's a larger picture of our culture in terms of sexual activity and relationships and personal identity and the value men and women have that cause them to be involved in those things. And so the other thing the Lord began to say is you can't talk about abortion without talking about the heart of a woman.
Okay. So
and you
that's where
can't
this
talk about
comes
the heart of a woman without talking about the power of a father in her life. Like a lot of random, the heart of a woman and abortion, okay, I get it. So there's a woman who has desires and dreams, and she's involved with abortion. What does that mean with her heart and her dreams? And then that heart is also connected to the power of a father in her life, the formative influence of a father in the life of a woman, growing up as a little girl into a young woman, and her identity as a woman, her later sexual choices, whether those choices are going to be consistent and whether they're going to really be something that can be integrated in how she was designed. I mean, is she going to be making choices that go against the very design that she was designed, how she was designed by God in terms of her safety and security? Is she going to be making sexual choices that violate her needs for safety and security and permanence and commitment? Those kind of things. So that made us begin to look at that. And then kind of fast forward, after a few years, we had an opportunity to go to Russia. And this is where this...
And at that point, because you have, how many daughters do you have for the audience?
I've got six girls and 2 boys. I got eight kids.
8 kids. So are you having daughters at this point? So you're also, your heart's connecting with the heart of a daughter and kind of seeing how God's designed them in the midst of all of this as well?
Yeah, I think it's happening. I don't know how
clear it is at this point.
I think it's just part of my environment.
And you're processing what the Lord told you, and now you're kind of trying to put all these things together that God had just told you, those specific things. You can't talk about abortion, Jim, unless you talk about the heart of a daughter, and you can't really talk about that unless you talk about her. Okay.
So those values, those are important connections to make. And so we end up going to Russia on a mission trip to preach and teach about the abortion issue, but also about the emerging kind of this heart of the woman thing. The contextualization of the abortion issue is how God designed a woman's heart. What's in a woman's heart? How does she end up being worse in this situation? And so we're in Russia, and I remember we're in a workshop with 45 women and 5 men. It's a breakout session where I'm preaching about the church's role in dealing with abortion.
Okay.
That's the topic.
Yeah. So you're the breakout session at the conference.
This is the breakout. So I'm the preach. My identity is I'm an information giver.
Yeah.
I'm an information giver. I've got a great message here. This is a great message about the role of the church in dealing with abortion.
Okay.
I got 3 points to the message. The first point is to preach abortion as sin, but we do it with a broken heart and real tenderness, not condemning, but abortion is sin and present it as such. And the second would be to create a role of the church, is to create an atmosphere for healing and restoration for anyone that's been involved in this issue. The third would be the prophetic voice to be into the culture, to warn the nation that we continue to do this. God is not mocked. Whatever we sow, we will reap. And to be a voice, the church would be a prophetic voice. And so I'm in the workshop, and I'm preaching the first point, and I'm about halfway into it, and I noticed that in the group, I hearing this kind of this crying. There's audible crying happening in the room. That the 45 ladies that had come to the workshop are starting to cry, and they're not just sniffling or tear. They're actually crying. Some of them are starting to sob, and it was very disconcerting for me. I had not been used to that. This message was impacting them. Something was happening, and I remember having a micro conversation with God where you're real time. You're preaching the message, but you're also talking to God, kind of. And I said to the Lord, Lord, if these ladies keep crying, I'm not going to be able to finish my message. Because it was about this.
I'm so curious to hear what his response was to that.
And the Lord says, he goes, I don't care about your dumb message. I'm changing your ministry. And it frightened me because I think at that same moment he said, I'm changing your ministry. I want you to stop your message and invite the women to receive prayer for healing and restoration from sexual sin and abortion. So it made me nervous. It made me feel like it'd be like telling somebody, you're gonna be in a meeting, and I want you to have everybody in wheelchairs come down to the front, and you're gonna pray for them, and they're gonna get up and walk out of their wheelchairs. Kind of like, well, Lord, you're the one that heals a woman's heart. I can pray for them, but like, how do I promise that's going to happen? That God's going to minister to them? It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. I felt like it was over my head. Kind of like, I'm happy to be involved in the pro-life movement, but when we're really dealing with what's really happening with women's hearts when they're involved in sexual relationships and have done things that can't be reversed, what am I supposed to say to them? It was an intense sense of discomfort I had, and I try to make excuses. I said, well, Lord, men don't work with women. The men work with the boyfriends, and they raise the money for pro-life, and they don't really work with the women. These are private, very personal areas for women, and the women work with the women. So you don't understand. And the Lord said this. He said, do you think that the broken heart of a daughter could be healed by the touch of a father? And that was a yes. I mean, I said, yeah, that's who I am. I believe that. That's how I see myself as a dad, as a person with some sensitivity. And he goes, that's why you're here. I go, okay. So that excuse didn't work, And so the next excuse was, well, Lord, I don't want to insult these ladies by just saying, well, okay, now we're just going to pray now, and like now it's going to happen. Like on your mark, get set, healing. Like in America, Lord, I said, Lord, in America, it takes a 12-week Bible study for women to get healed from things. That's how we do it. We do 12-week Bible studies, and they kind of process things slowly. And this is a deep thing. I don't want to insult them and say now, it's just now going to happen. All these wounds that you've carried for years are just going to now, healing now. And then the Lord challenged me. He said, do I have your permission to be a supernatural God? And I said, well, if you really want to, if you want to just stop everything and open heaven over a broken-hearted daughter that you care about, and in a moment of time begin to touch her life and just affirm to her how important she is, and that you want to break shame and self-hatred and all the things that she's carrying, you want to restore her heart. If you really want to do that, I guess I can give you permission to do that. That's what you like to do, And so that was the end. So then we stopped the meeting, because that was all going on while I was still finishing my message. I was talking to the Lord, and
you and the Holy Spirit are having a conversation.
Yes, me and the Lord are arguing, and so we
like
get
he
done.
really needs to.
We
Do you
done,
feel
I
like
say okay?
Yeah, the permission part is interesting to me. Why do you think he asked you that? Was he being kind of sarcastic, where he's like, "Do I need your permission to?" Sounds like God talking to Job to me, kind of a little bit.
Well, he said,
who are you to?
If I want to,
Yeah.
Do I have your permission to be a supernatural God? Yeah. Because we often represent the gospel. We don't want to, we have a low view of that divine moment. We forgot the power of the Lord to do things and what he wants to do. And so we stopped the message or the meeting, and I said, all those that want healing, just come into the aisle and come forward. They all stood up all at once. It was like I held up $1,000 bill, and they were all going, whoever gets here first. It was just, and just all the chairs scoot back simultaneously, and they're all in line crying. And this all started because they were crying, so they're still crying. There's still this weight of brokenness in them, on their faces, and this horrible burden they're carrying. And I remember I said, Lord, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, how I'm going to do this. What am I supposed to say to them? I remember the first lady. I'll never forget the first lady. And I found out her name was Stella. She had bleached blonde hair and a see-through white kind of blouse with a black brassiere. Kind of not necessarily typical dress, but I wasn't surprised by that. Just the Russian women, the brokenness of the Russian women, and the emphasis on their sexuality and their identity being sexual, and their interaction with men being very sexually defined by sexuality in that culture. And I'd come to understand that. And so here she is, the first one, named Stella. And I found out that Stella meant star. And I remember I was saying, Lord, what do I say to her? I'm going to pray for her. And he said, tell her she's a bright star for me, not a dull star. Affirm, in other words, affirm who she is. And so I said, Stella, the Lord's telling me that you're a bright star for him and you're not a dull star. And her face contorted. She began to cry more. And there was a sense that I was like, Lord, this isn't helping. Every time I say something, they cry more, and the Lord just said, there's healing in tears, and you need to understand what I'm doing. I'm allowing pain to be released and get used to it. And so that's kind of how it unfolded. And then the other thing is later, the Lord gave me a picture of a flower, and this phrase kind of came to me, the Lord is the only one that can put the petals back on the flower that the devil has torn off. Just a statement, like you see yourself as a flower, you see yourself as a damaged flower, and so I'm going to tell you this, that he's the only one that can put the petals back on the flower that the devil has torn off. And that would create more crying, and it was like, well, this is healing, though. This isn't more pain. This is a blessing. So that was the genesis where that began to shift, and we realized that our messaging, our message was being altered from just pro-life to the heart of a woman, and the heart of a woman in the context of her sexual life, her relationships, and what God, just the identity he had for women, and the horrible pressure against women in the culture to have their identity be sexual, and that would guarantee their depersonalization, and it would guarantee heartache and brokenness. They would never be loved for who they were as a person. They would never be cherished. They would be objectified and taken advantage of, which is still what's going on today. It's masqueraded and covered up in so many different ways in our culture, and it's not talked about much. It's not emphasized to the degree I'd like it to be more common.
When you got into this, when did you start getting messages for the young guys? Because that was one of the things that I remember coming into the youth ministry, one, seeing you speak, and then it felt like every woman in the youth ministries bawling and crying, and they're up there getting prayer, and they're giving you hugs, and you're praying with them, even when we went through school leadership. But then also you were going like, hey guys, are you catching this? Are you seeing this? Are you seeing like how God designed them? Are you seeing that your job is to protect them and not to be a predator? Are you seeing their heart? Like, when did that start taking place?
Well, I think when the pain and brokenness in women and their vulnerability begins to be evident, I think the result is that it's a form of God calling men. I mean, Adam was called to cultivate the garden and guard the garden. He had a responsibility that cult for growth and protection. And I think there's a created design in men that there's a protective instinct in men that God has put in men that is the key to what I'm talking about. And I had this sense that, like we talked about, kind of the rap men get, this sort of critical, he just is playing video games and he's living in his mom's house, he's in the basement. And when I thought about that statement, I thought about what's in a man. There's so much in men today that culture doesn't want. You know, this talking of toxic masculinity and these male attributes that are, quote, negative, aggression, violence, risk taking. They're all kind of they're seen as negative. You know, they're seen as, that just contributes chaos to the culture, and they want to feminize men so much and change their nature. So in the case of the guy playing video games, it's like, well, wait a minute. In a video game, there's a maiden to be rescued, a city wall to be breached, city gates to be torn down, an enemy to be defeated, fellow brothers to fight with, and your name to be listed among the heroes. Wow. It's all the things that are in a man that we're designed for. And so we read it wrong when we say he's got the wrong battle. That's all he has is the wrong battle. He's called to fight. He's called, there's a maiden to be rescued in the video game. It's all there. It's just a little microcosm of what's really in a man's heart. Those things wouldn't sell to the degree they sell if they were missing what's in a man. They've targeted a man exactly where he's at. The only thing we need to do is reintroduce men to the real battle. Men are looking for a fight, and it's right under our noses, and no one's inviting the men into this. It's right there. I mean, literally, there's a damsel. There are maidens to be rescued, and a city wall to be breached, and a enemy to be defeated, and fellow brothers to fight with. This is the kingdom of God, and this is our calling by God to create cultures and societies that are respective of women and where they're not taken advantage of, and the male attributes aren't about sexual conquest. This is what we're called to create. It starts with a family formation and then many families together extending into the culture. So we have civilization. We have civilized culture that isn't predatory and destructive. And to me, that's the key. There's all the talk about pornography, you know, and a lot of the programs, there's different programs, and, you know, they're talking about brain science and addiction chemistry. I understand that, and accountability, I get that, and kind of a militaristic sense of we're in this together, let's jump out of the airplane together.
Yeah, white knuckle brothers.
Yeah, let's let white knuckle brothers together. Yeah. We're going to do this. We're going to win. We're going to beat porn. I hate porn. We're going to beat it.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand it. But the thing that I've looked for and wanting to see is this description of the damage being done to women.
Mm. And the broken heart for
really
it.
Somehow to describe it, repeat it, so it's rehearsed and it's imparted to the guys so when that happens, the protective instinct then is activated in a man. When a man, the last thing any of us ever want to hear is a woman screaming like someone's assaulting her.
Yeah. Because
we have to move toward that. It's like kind of like we have to we have to move toward it at risk to ourselves. We don't want to. There's something in us. There's a self-preservation. There's another part that's even greater, is that we want to have an internal consistency, that we have some kind of integrity, that we didn't run away from something where someone was being destroyed, and we move toward that cry. And I think that we need to describe the condition of women, what happens to young women, what happens to women in relationships where there's not marriage and there's sexual stuff going on, and to herald the damage being done to women. And I think the feminists don't like that, because it plays into women are weak, and that the reason they're broken is they're weak. Well, they're being beat up by darkness. That's why they're broken, whether they're weak or not. And they can't really, this isn't something where they're called to defend themselves against the powers of darkness targeting them and using, they have a peculiar vulnerability to the sexual spirit. Like, I have daughters, they're capable, wise, they're gifted and intelligent.
All of them are
They
incredible.
do all sorts of great things, but every daughter has a peculiar vulnerability to the sexual spirit, where there's a temptation that she might allow her identity to be sexualized, and out of that make choices that are going to end up helping destroy they'll become accomplice to the destruction of their own dreams by the choices they make. And so part of my dream of the messaging of the church and toward men is to describe the damage being done to women, to the point where that greatest ally in a man's battle for purity, that protective instinct, will be awakened.
Yeah.
And that will change everything. I've seen when young men get this finally, all of a sudden it changes everything. Instead of every man's battle, we're going to be in this fight forever, they're raised to another level of honorable awareness, where the pull of that sexual temptation is diminished. It's altered by the Lord, because of they're seeing the battle, they're seeing victims, horrible victimization of women, and the pain. And just to, like, we would see this in our discipleship schools. We would teach all week stuff like this, and at the end of the week we would pray. And in the prayer time, the girls would be crying. They'd be releasing pain of sexual experiences they had, molestation, or just old boyfriends, and feeling like they got ripped off or were lied to or betrayed. So that pain's coming out through tears and literal cries, and men are in the room listening to that, and they're like, and to me, it's birthing something in them.
That's what happened to me.
It births something. It's like, it's that scenario of they're hearing the cry, they're hearing the cry. And I think that is
You're
a gift
hearing like the truth. You're hearing like
you don't see
they
this
almost have like a mask on them, and they're removing the mask because they're safe with a father, and they're sharing how they really feel.
Yeah.
And what it really feels like to be manipulated and lied to, or to have somebody only want them for their body and not for who they are. And you're just kind of sitting there going, oh my gosh, I've been playing into this. I've been a part of this problem. I never really understood this is really what their heart is. And here they are weeping and crying from the actions of guys that may or may not have really understood or wanted to hurt them, but are also caught up in their own trauma and their own, being told by culture that their masculinity is based on their body count. And so here it's just, and then all of a sudden you're in a room and they're safe and they're sharing their heart, and I remember just being in shock.
Yeah, it's
and then you care for them because you're in relationship with them. They're like your sisters. You're doing life with them in school, and now your heart's breaking for them, and then you're self-reflecting of your own self, and it's pretty powerful.
I feel like I always say it's a gift from the Lord to the men, that there are very few men on the earth that have gotten to be in an environment at this moment like you're in now, hearing this. You're hearing what really happens to women in our culture, and this is a gift from God. It's a gift that's can change your manhood and help you to be the kind of man you want to be. We've done that before. Like we were in Thailand. I remember I preached a message and I called for the women that come. I talked about women who weren't protected or who had pain from their sexual past. And these ladies in Thailand ran to the altar and started weeping, and you could hear them. They're all crying. And the music was playing. I stopped the music. I said, hey, stop the music. You could hear them crying. I go, men, listen. Listen, this is a gift from heaven for you. They're listening, and that's part of what we need, is that protective instinct activated. And when we really see that, and that we rehearse that, and it becomes part of our thinking, and it changes how we view, how we act. And to me, it's one of the missing components in the conversation of male purity and male purpose.
The real understanding, the heart behind it, not just the action of purity. Yeah. I'm curious, you said something, I want to talk about that. You said it starts with family. And that was something you said earlier when you were talking about purity and understanding it from a daughter, from a young man, and it starts with a healthy home. And I want to get into that, but I first want to talk briefly about when you're in the pro-life movement, as you're going through this in your messaging, you also ended up in jail.
Well, what the pro-life, part of the pro-life movement that we were in was called the rescue movement, that was birthed in the late 80s into the early years of the 90s, where Christians would go to the abortion clinic on the day of the abortions, and they would sit in front of the doors and sing and pray. And then when the ladies were trying to come for their abortion, or the staff at the clinic, they couldn't get in. So basically the clinic was closed if we were there. Mm. And that was so the result of that is that
that was the strategy of the church back then.
That was the strategy of what they called the rescue movement. And it was a strategy that was going to, quote, work just for just a small number of years because of the response of the pro-abortion people. But when we first did that, women couldn't get in, and then we had counselors looking for women. They could see the women that were coming, and they would go up and talk to them, and some of them would say, I didn't want to do this anyway, and they chose life for their child because we had come out to sit and pray and sing and say, basically, this place is closed by the order of the Church of the Lord today. And so that's and as a result, you're trespassing, and as a result of that, you have a penalty of a day in jail or a couple of days in jail, or a longer term where you're sentenced to a little longer term based on repeated offenses.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Be Bold for Jesus. If you've ever felt the urge to live out your faith more boldly, to step up and make an impact in your workplace, your church, or your community, this conference is for you. The Be Bold for Jesus conference is coming back to Spokane, Washington. It's a weekend packed with worship, encouragement, and practical tools to help you live out your faith confidently. You'll hear from incredible speakers who are living examples of what it means to be bold for Christ. Tickets are on sale now at beboldforjesus.org. That's beboldforjesus.org. Grab your tickets today and let's be bold together.
I have a feeling did you end up repeatedly ending up in jail? You seem to have that personality when you lock in and believe this is the action. I'm going all in.
It was something that was a way of, it was a response to this that would temporarily address the situation and be an answer for some people at that moment, for some women. And we feel like we were doing something. We were saying something as a church that what's happening is wrong, and we're willing to suffer for it. We're willing to intervene. And it was something that was I don't know how to describe it. It was just something we could do that promised to have some change, immediate change. And it was an action that seemed to be somewhat adequate based on what was really happening. Like we're trying to stop this evil. And
do you feel like it worked, or do you feel like we need a
it
different
worked
strategy?
because
And then do you mind pointing this directly at your mouth? I think it, for some reason, is pointing past your ear there. Just the mic. You can twist this more toward you. There we go. Yeah.
So it was, it worked in this. If some lady comes that morning and says, I didn't want to do this after all, and I'm glad you guys were here, how do you quantify that?
Right.
I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure there's children born that, and
because in that instance,
women
you
who
just
have an
saved
opportunity
a life.
to embrace a repentance and have a change of lifestyle and a change of where God is involved in restoring their life from what being in this place where they're right in front of the conveyor belt that we talked about. And so it worked. It worked. I don't know. It sounds kind of, does it work? Did it work? Did it do something in the heart of the church that was later multiplied in the different mountains in business and in government, and the seed of the people who were involved in the rescue movement and the early pro-life movement, as we stayed in that, and tons of those people that were involved in that ended up in different arenas and with that same heart to see something change for our country. And what was it, 45 years later, Roe versus Wade gets overturned.
Yeah.
And we're not the only, I'm not here to say we were the only, in the rescue movement, the only one. There was all sorts, every person, every prayer, every letter, every march, every picket sign, everything added up to this beautiful.
Do you remember where you were at when you heard that Roe v. Wade finally got overturned after a 45-year battle? Because I remember exactly where I was at. We were at the hospital, and we were in the ultrasound room, and I just found out I was having a daughter.
Really?
Yeah.
What a cool time.
And I just...
What a cool time to hear that.
At the exact same time, we were reading it on the phone. Like, at the exact same time. It was very surreal. But my thought immediately went to you, and my thought was, man, I wonder how Jim's feeling right now after 45 years of...
It was sort of... I don't know how to... We all thought we're just going to keep going and we're still not done. It's still this demonic spirit that's hanging over our country with all the chemical abortions now, and the states that are entranced with the spirit of death, So it's kind of like patchwork civil war, the red states and the pro-abortion states and the pro-life states, and that's kind of where we're at now.
But what did it feel like when you first, do you remember where you were at when you heard it?
I just thought of all the years and the effort, and like me, I was working at the former Washington Water Power, which is now Avista, and I had 5 kids. When I quit my job to become a pro-life leader.
With 5 kids?
Yeah. And so it's like... That's
a obedience jump right there all in its own.
Yeah, it was kind of like... I remember we were doing some of our pro-life stuff. We were in the Coeur d'Alene jail, and 2 men said to me, one of them owned some health fitness clubs in town. He said, Jim, if you'd like to do this full time, I'll give you $100 a month, support. And then the other guy was an eye doctor. So here you have a fitness owner and an eye doctor. We're all in jail for the same thing. Like these guys are men of conviction. They are professionals and they are successful, but they have a conviction that what was going on was wrong, and it was their way to express that by being involved in this, in the rescue movement. I mean, they said that, and I started thinking maybe there's other people that would want to stand with us, support us in what we're doing, and which led to my retirement, my early retirement from Washington Water Power, and that was 35 years ago. Where I said we've been living out of a mailbox ever since. I've never been on a church staff or anything. It was just people that heard about what we were doing and kind of got used to our message and liked what we were doing and wanted to be part of it. So that's been we're really grateful to all those people, and we really want to continue to have the integrity to continue to do what God's asked us to do, and to be worthy of their support and worthy of that.
So when you hear that, you're just kind of the flood of all the years of the memories and where you started.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of
back.
the different people and the motley crew of people that he assembled. I mean, the variety of people and the kinds of churches and the experiences, and just how over our heads we were, and how we're just trying to figure it out and do something that would be that the Lord could look at and say, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. And I'm going to honor that. I'm watching. That kind of.
Yeah. You said earlier, just kind of go back, you kind of had said that all this comes down to family. Why do you see it that way?
Well, it's the building block of society. The family unit is the building block of society, and if you don't have stable family generationally, you're going to just have disintegration. You think about let's take sexuality, like this instruction on sexuality, and if a family's broken, say the dad's not there, and the little girl doesn't know what a man is, there's no one to help form her identity of her value, and with that sense of protection, and so she doesn't have that, and grows up without that identity, and she has a temptation to, because of the nature of our culture, to take on a sexualized identity that's only going to promise pain and heartache, and probably promise men who are temporarily involved in her life and not long-term involved in her life. And if she has children, men who are temporarily involved in women's lives when there's children create fatherlessness and children without fathers. And when the fathers aren't in that family, young men don't know how to treat women. They don't have an example. There isn't a man in their life that's committed to their mother and is willing to sacrifice for that. And that picture of manhood is absent. So a young man's catechism is the inside of bathroom stalls for their sexuality and their understanding of manhood. That's where it starts.
Yeah, we just had the chief of police in here. He was showing me pictures of literally people writing their number in bathroom stalls that led them to trafficking situations that they found.
Really?
Yeah, last week, yeah.
Like where they're asking for help?
No, or they have a pimp or somebody, or they're writing, they're saying, hey, to hook up, here's my number, and different things like that, yeah.
Well, the other thing is our theology. I think Isaiah 14:12 describes the enemy, the fallen angel Lucifer, and we know the thief. We know the New Testament descriptions of the power of darkness. The thief, and he's like a roaring lion. He's the father of lies. Yeah. Those are kind of images and descriptions of the enemy. But in this one, in Isaiah 14:12, it talks about he that weakens the nations. is a phrase that describes this fallen angel, and he's described by his task, what he's known for doing, is how they describe him. He that weakens the nations. And our theology, here's our theology as Christians, that the nation is only as strong as the church in that nation. That God's people are the answer for nations, and that it's God's people. So the nation is only as strong as the church in that nation. The church is only as strong as the family. The family is only as strong as the marriages. The marriages are only as strong as that young man and that young woman who God puts together to be a team.
Wow.
So when you think about if the enemy's plan is to weaken the nations, this is what he thinks about. This is his end goal. It describes who he is, what he does to weaken the nations. And if our theology says that the church in that nation, and the church is only as strong as the families are only as strong as the marriages are only as strong as that young man, that young woman who God puts together to be a team. So then who are you going to target if you're the enemy for a long-term protracted assault against the family that is going to help strengthen that nation? You're going to put your crosshairs on the heart of that young man and the heart of that young woman to try to bring as much pain and shame and regret and as many negative sexual experiences as you can, so that those young people don't have a hope to form any kind of permanent, long-term, positive relationship.
Yeah, because if they can't do that, then they don't have a healthy marriage. And if you don't have healthy
just,
marriages, you don't have a healthy church.
I think that's... So he's targeting that, and this is the whole messaging of the culture to encourage young sexual experiences when you're younger and younger, and sexualized identities and behaviors that are...
Man, there's so much in there. With one of the things that's coming to mind is just, we had Ike in here.
Yeah.
And I could talk highly about just going through some of the struggles and addictions that he was going through and how much you impacted his life. But I remember there was one thing he specifically said. He said, you just told him, look, Ike, if you're a 3, like, just be the best 3 you can be. And I'm wondering, like, my thought in that is it's almost like this message of, like, just being faithful to who God's called you to be and where you're at, instead of this level of comparison. And I almost wonder if having all the social media, having all the sexual encounters, trying to fit in that chameleon spirit of trying to compare yourself all the time kind of plays into all that, so that the enemy can utilize that essentially to try and attack and try to provide these memories and shame so they can't have a healthy marriage and have a healthy relationship. Do you see any correlation between that? Because I just find what you're talking about, what I dealt with, what Ike dealt with, was a lot of chameleon and a lot of comparison of just wanting to fit in and being told, like, this is how you fit in.
Yeah, I mean, what I meant, I think, is that we can't be more than like, when someone begins a relationship with God, it's like you can't be 5 years down the road. You're just where you're at. You got to be where you're at and let the Lord move you from glory to glory, from where you're at to the next place. And you just need to be the best. If you're 2 years old in the Lord, he doesn't expect you to be 5 years old in the Lord with all this knowledge and all this. He just expects you to be where you are and to just take a deep breath and enjoy that.
Okay, so why do you feel like it looks to me, as somebody that's always loving to share the gospel and bring my friends into the church that have never been in the church, why do you feel like, for lack of a better term, it feels like we eat our own? Like, as soon as somebody gets saved, we want them to be Billy Graham. And I'm like, why does that happen? Because I do think it immediately shows them, like, to fit in here, you're going to be compared to someone that's 5 years down the road, and you almost can't just be.
Well, yeah, I think that's where the discipleship process is personal and not programmed, and where people are given permission to be where they are. And there's an expectation for growth, but based on the level of revelation they have, and where they aren't being put into a box or forced into a mold or something, but just to enjoy the Lord's enjoyment of them. I mean, it's like you got a little kid who's a 2-year-old, and they're great when they're 2, and if they keep acting like a 2-year-old and they're 5, and things are bad, things start to be bad. And you just think, why they're 2 and 3, nobody's expecting them to be 5, but there's an expectation of a natural progression.
Yeah.
And if you want to mess a kid up, you can expect him to be older than he is and punish him for not being older than he is. And that'll create a messed up. I don't think the Lord...
Well, and now I feel like everybody has a platform. They have a phone. They might be 2 months in the Lord, and they're sharing what they're learning or what they're growing in.
Yeah.
And so somebody might be scrolling through or listening to somebody and assuming, hey, this person might have been saved for 10 years and they have bad theology, or, there's no sign above your head when you're walking around the church that says, I'm 1, I'm 2,
Yeah,
I'm 3, I'm brand new.
I'm brand new, I'm learning.
Yeah.
Give me room. Give me room to grow.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, of course, then I've been here for 10 years and I'm still in diapers. And so how do you process that? You're saying there should be an expectation of growth, but also grace for where they're at in the midst of that. Yeah. I wonder, it makes me think of your model that you've kind of always encouraged young people that are in and around your life to court instead of date, in a sense of dating with purpose, not just to go out on a date, but to really have purpose behind it. And is that also part of the really getting to know somebody and where they're at? Are they 2 years old in the faith? Are they 10 years old in the faith? How do we walk through this process and figure out if we're compatible without hurting each other or without giving up something that should only go to our spouse? And then also, if we start that process and we realize we're not a good fit, but we haven't given our heart away, that's also a win. Because I feel like for some reason, when I think of the word courtship or I've talked to other people, I always had this mindset of you're essentially deciding to get married before you even start the process. I'm meeting her, she's meeting me, but we're essentially trying to figure out if we're going to get married. And so there's this pressure, but in talking with you and walking through it with Sarah, that was never what you put on us. It was just, you're going, hey, if you guys walk through this process and you realize that you're not compatible or the Lord's not asking you to get married, but yet you still haven't given away your heart, that's also a win, so that when you do meet your spouse, you can essentially communicate to them, hey, I had other people I was getting to know, but I never went past something that is only for you. When you're looking at family and the healthiness of the family, is that why you've always been a proponent for walking young people through relationships? And because now as I'm listening to you talk, you're going, the church is only as healthy as the family, but the family can only be as healthy as the two and their relationship and their marriage. Is that why you've been so passionate about that topic?
Well, I think that's it. I mean, you got your own kids too you're thinking about, and you want to see reality in terms of relationships. I mean, we're back to kind of man and women. Everybody, you get Facebook. Back in the day, Facebook, and it's Facebook, I'm in a relationship. And everybody wants to know right away. What do they want to know? Are you guys doing stuff? Are you guys doing sexual things? Everybody wants to know. It's kind of it's all about man and woman equals sexual stuff right away. It's all stereotypes. it's kind of an cultural expectation, you know, that so there's this preoccupation with that, and with this sexualization of relationships where all roads lead to sexual involvement. And what fruit is there from that? You know, this is the dating world of how do you have a relationship not based on hormones or glands? I mean, I think about the young adult generation. It's instant closeness through sexual involvement with no rejection. Wow. Like, I met this guy, gal, you know, and we got together and we have instant closeness through sexual relationship without any rejection. This is wonderful. This is perfect. Except for we don't know each other. We don't know the other person, and we have this bonding together through a sexual encounter with all the hormones and all the bonding that creates, but without a knowledge of the person. And I think courtship gives young people a chance to have a friendship that can grow, where they want intimacy. They want to have intimacy. We're made for intimacy, and I think you want to use tools that will help preserve true intimacy and knowing the other person, getting to know the other person. I mean, sexual involvement can cement two people together where you can have a feeling of closeness, kind of chemistry, without really knowing the other person, you know. And I think our culture can accelerate that and kind of drives that. You know, the question, are you sexually active? You know, it's like everything is driven to make you feel like you're like a numbskull unless you're involved in sex with everybody else, you know, like.
Yeah, I remember my freshman year just getting made fun of all the time because, you know, calling you like the Virgin Mary and like all this stuff, and this kind of pressure that was kind of placed on me going from a Christian school to a private or a public school, and having all this opportunity to hook up with these girls and just constantly trying to say no. But again, I think for me it was less about purity and it was more about virginity, if that makes sense. Like I was so focused on like, this is, you know, I need to keep my virginity till I'm married because I'm a Christian. And so then when I, you know, play with fire long enough and you mess up, then it was kind of this thought of like, well, I already messed up, so I might as well just go all in. And there wasn't a thought process of, you know, okay, I landed here, but I need to restructure, and there's forgiveness and there's a reset. It was almost like I'd lost it. And so might as well just go full-fledged into that. And so I can see that, you know, there is a bit of pressure, and I can only imagine what it's like now, you know, than for young people coming into it. And so you're essentially saying like courtship, in your mind, kind of helps alleviate some of that pressure.
It could be. It's a structure that people voluntarily step into to help protect them. I mean, you ask young people, do you want to have a relationship with purity? And they go, yeah, we'd like to have a relationship with purity. Do you want a relationship where you're protecting each other's emotions? Would you like to have a relationship where there's communication? Would you like to have a relationship where other people might be involved in your relationship that you respect and love, that they love you? You know, like, or are you going to make all the decisions evaluating this person, getting to know them on your own? Is there going to be anybody else? Would you like to have that? Yeah. And would you like your relationship to be an example to the next generation? Those are some questions that define courtship. You know, it's purity, protection of emotions, communication, honoring another generation to be involved, and being a witness. So if those are some of the essential elements of courtship, a lot of young people, you ask them those questions, they say, yeah, I want all those. But when you say courtship, they kind of go, sounds like castles and, like some
Old Testament
Robin
structure.
Hood or something,
But essentially, it's like kind of dating with a purpose, with other people speaking into it, with having accountability, with, right. And for me, I had all those questions too, because I was like, what does this mean? But, for me, why Sarah and I highly enjoyed the process. And I think a lot of what we went through is probably what has helped us stay married, is just a lot of the things that we learned and the process. Because for me, I think up until Sarah, almost every relationship I always had, there was a sexual component to it, right? So if this is the table, whatever is physically allowed on the table, that's what I'm focused on. So if I'm allowed to make out with this girl, then every time we hang out, I'm going to try and make out with her, and you can fill in the blank from there. That has now become my focus. And so with talking to you and getting to know Sarah, we essentially just took everything off the table. Like nothing was allowed. Holding hands wasn't allowed. Like nothing was allowed, not out of rules, but just out of the logic and the process of going, hey, you actually need to get to know another human being for who they are, not just what they can give you sexually. And if you're going to spend the rest of your life with this person, there's going to be seasons where you aren't going to be able to hook up, and she's going to be pregnant and she's going to be on her period. And like, she's not just your, that's not the only thing that she has to bring into this relationship. And so for Sarah and I, it was unique. And we're not saying this for everybody. For us, we felt like the Lord asked us not to even kiss till the altar, because she wasn't really my wife until we had that covenant. And knowing me and knowing my past, it's always easier to speed up than slow down. And I don't know if we even wanted to kind of start that process until, it's our wedding night, and we don't have to slow down. And that was really helpful for us, but it also really helped me and her really get to know each other as a person, to know that we actually do love each other. And if things get hard, we still choose each other. And it has nothing to do with sex. It just has to do with, am I committed to you? Am I committed to this relationship? Do I want to spend the rest of my life with you as a person? And then the rest of that is great and it's fun, but there's more depth to it. And I just never, I don't know, there was something for me, maybe specifically as somebody that had like more of a crazy past, or a tendency to be a little bit more crazy and provide myself with self-inflicted trauma with some of the decisions that I made in my life. There's something about the structure of it and the safety in it, and having people pour into us and really make sure that, hey, are we aligned spiritually? Are we aligned with where we look at things politically? Are we aligned with things the way that we look at family? Are we aligned with, once we get to a certain point in our life, are we going to both have careers, or one of us going to be at home, one of us going to make the money? It allows us to have all of those conversations and process through all of that to see if we really are compatible without throwing in the sexuality piece. And, my friends are always like giving me a hard time saying, wait, dude, you're only going to how do you know if you're sexually compatible? And, and the reality is like 1 + 1 = 2. Like you can figure that out. And ideally, I look at it kind of wishing, honestly, that I had never made any other choices to be with anybody else before my wife. Because if you can imagine, if Sarah, who never had any of those experiences, and if I had never had any of those experiences, it doesn't matter if she's the worst at kissing. I'm not going to know. I think she's great. And we're going to be able to figure this out, and everything's going to be new to both of us. And I think that's really God's intent for a marriage. And then when you throw in all the craziness of sexuality, like there's grace and there's the Lord in that, but you're still kind of bringing some of that garbage into it, whether you want to or not. And so I just loved never seeing it or hearing it or even understanding it until we talked. Like I loved the concept of it. and to even walk through having those conversations. Like Sarah and I had to have those conversations. I have a past. You don't have a past. She has her own past with her own trauma that isn't sexually related. Right. I have my trauma that I'm bringing into it. And so I just really thought it was really awesome, but I think it saved our marriage, because there's been seasons of hardship when you throw in trying to start a ministry, trying to start a family, living out of a mailbox. You start, throwing in all of these different dynamics and trying to do something that maybe you've never seen before, and start a ministry you've never really seen before. And then health issues and all the other things that the enemy seems to go after people on. Having that foundational time of courtship, I think Sarah and I would talk to each other and say that's probably saved our marriage. What do you,
praise the Lord,
but you had a lot to do with that, and you were walked through it with us a lot. And, I have a very different upbringing than she does, and we have very different pasts, and you couldn't make two people more opposite. But I'm just wondering if you could talk to like a young person that is maybe in my situation or Sarah's, or just a young person in general, kind of what courtship is and why they would maybe want to consider doing it, that option with having accountability and not just jumping into the physical side of it, And then I always joke when my friends are like, wait, you're going to sleep with the same person every day? And I'm like, brother, you haven't been married very long. My wife is not the same person every day. And she jokes about that too. But, for some reason we put so much on that one piece of the sexual compatibility. Look, when you're married and you love somebody, and your only focus is your wife and her focus is only you figure that out. You figure out what each other likes, and that part is such a minuscule part to having a successful marriage, I believe. But for some reason, I don't know why that's always the main thing that everybody focuses on.
We've made the sexual experience the ultimate experience of life, and everybody pursues it, and it's kind of the defining issue of identity. Look at the culture now with identity and how sexualized in the gay and lesbian movement, how sexuality is defined identity, and even the transgenderism now is everything is driven by sexual experience. And the old, it's not new. The Old Testament gods, Baal and Asherah, were gods of fertility. They were the gods that Israel was called to forsake for the true God, Yahweh. And so that spirit is still alive today. It's been around for thousands of years, and like the names have been changed, but that same spirit is alive. And I think when we're dealing on a spiritual level with culture and people, we just see the enemy he's got his same old tricks and same old lies, and he's trying to make a gift from God. He tries to pervert a gift from God and making it the highest human experience, where a replacement for a relationship with God. People pursue a sexual moment or a sexual encounter, to replace a relationship with God. And I think we see the fallout from that. It doesn't satisfy. You've got good things become idols, and even the gift of sexuality can become an idol that leaves people empty and broken. You look at someone like, a Tiger Woods, who, what more could he have wanted? He had money and a great gift at golf, but he can't keep it together in this one area. It's amazing how that idolatry of this area and the lack of control over it, these very renowned people who, look at the destruction of sexuality has gotten out of control, and where there's really idolatry, where we make this the most important part of life. Even the most important part of marriage, or it's a part of marriage, it's a part of life, but it's not the most important. And anything can become an idol, and we can become driven by it. And our culture is sexualized, and there's tremendous pressure. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to be a little 13-year-old girl in our culture. I always say, I know where sex trafficking starts.
Yeah.
It doesn't start in Thailand, you know, where the men from the West are coming over there and hanging out with the Thai girls. And it doesn't start in Eastern Europe, where they traffic the girls from Eastern Europe to Western Europe. It doesn't start with a runaway girl at the downtown Seattle bus station being pimped out by somebody. But the true spirit of sex trafficking starts in the junior high hallway down the street from your house, where the messaging of the culture to the 13 or 12 and 13-year-old girl is the most important part of who you are is your sexuality, is your body. And that's all she hears during those formative years. That's the message everywhere she looks, by seeing sexual scenes in movies, and everything is about this moment and this ecstasy of sexual encounter, and that you're you contribute to that. You're growing up to be part of this. You have the body parts. You have the body parts the whole world seeks after. And she does, and she doesn't even know hardly what to do with that herself. You know, it's so that kind of pressure. I think that the church is called to have a different message that can create identity on a different level, and we have to be aggressive about it. We have to identify the wrong messaging and then replace it with the right kind of messaging in a positive way to see that spirit broken. And I think that's part of it. You know, it starts early on, you know, that you teachable moments with your kids and talking about sexuality and who you are as a young man, who you are as a young woman. And that I remember my daughter would come in from youth group at night, and she'd come and knock on our door, and she'd come in and start crying. She was, all the kids are talking about boyfriends, and she felt all this pressure from the kids at youth group, you know. And I said, honey, you don't have to worry about that. That's for a later time in your life, and it's normal, and that's will probably happen with you, but we don't need to worry about that right now. And we just try to lift it off of her, the pressure off her, and for her just to grow up as a little girl and a young woman without that horrible pressure of you have to be something you don't want to, you have to be things you don't want to be and do things you don't want to do to try to get the love you want to have.
Can you say that again?
You don't, we want to take the pressure off young women so they don't have to do things they don't want to do and become someone they don't want to be to try to get the love they want to have.
Wow. That's,
you know, the last survey of young adult women between, I think, 15 and 35, it said that 57% of the young women from the survey were persistently sad in our culture. Like almost 6 out of 10 were persistently sad. I go, where would this sadness come from? I think where else would it come from but sexual pressure and either early sexual experiences that haven't been addressed or healed in their life, or early sexual experiences that they voluntarily got involved in, or sexual experiences with young men later in life that have been negative. I mean, where else would this persistent sadness come from in the young adult woman population? And the values of the culture saying you've got to act this way and do these things, and what you're being asked to be involved with has nothing to do with how you were designed. Your need for safety and security and permanence and commitment are being completely discounted, and you're being encouraged to get involved in situations where there's no hope for safety or security or permanence or commitment. So you're having to live a life that's antithetical to how you were designed all the time. You're wishing to be cherished and loved for who you are as a person. And if someone does that and really loves you, then you'll want to give them yourself to them in a natural context of commitment. Mm-hmm. But for not to not feel cherished and valued, and to feel like the reason that you're being pursued is because of your body or other ways that depersonalization takes place in the culture with young women.
Yeah.
That's really what.
And that's kind of what with the courtship model that kind of helps protect some of that.
Yeah, I think when a relationship does come up, we're saying we want to help this be positive. We want it. I mean, the dating world is, the best foot forward. Don't share any of the negatives. Try to impress the other person instead of a pressure-free situation where you don't have to try to impress somebody or try to be somebody you're not.
Yeah. That was very strange for me to walk through it. Like, not to be bringing flowers, not to try and wine and dine Sarah, but like just be like, hey, here's who I really am.
Push all the buttons.
And she was like, I don't want any of that. I don't want to be emotionally manipulated. I just want to get to know you.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that was like unique but helpful was in that process, if you're going, okay, if the goal isn't to put the best foot forward and win her over really, but to really get to know her, you had these questions that were incredible, because I'm going, I don't know what questions to ask to really get to know somebody, because it's always been about trying to push the right buttons or show the right face. And so you had these questions that you gave me. It was like 300 and some questions. And then Sarah and I essentially kind of went through them and said, hey, look, there's like 4 steps to a relationship. The first is friendship. The second is a little bit more serious. The third is I want to marry you. And the fourth is, hey, we're engaged and we're going to have some of these other questions. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of went through it, and my wife is so like detail oriented. She like took a marker and basically said, here's friendship questions. And they're all blue. Yeah. And that's all you can ask me. And if we get through all the blue questions
you go to the next
I start
color.
wanting to have green questions, then I'll know that I like you and we're going to move the relationship forward. But it was really helpful in a sense, because I didn't really know what to ask. I would have never thought that, all these questions are so important. As a guy, I mean, half the time I'm just going, I don't know, and so it was really awesome to have a framework. And then for us, we're so intense that we had to say, okay, once a week we're going to go through the questions. The other once a week we're going to go have fun, because then it became we're like hyper focused on these questions and couldn't just enjoy each other. And then there's other people that probably would just never take the questions serious. We're the opposite of that. But it was really fun to watch us kind of go through that. But what was interesting is every single time we'd end up in, like, I would say, a new color. There was like this kind of swinging that would emotionally kind of happen with my wife. And she would be very nervous of maybe because of what she'd gone through in her life. And so now she's having all these emotions of, I really want to have this more serious conversations, but now I'm nervous that if I, move into that series of questions, that means that I'm accepting that we're going to get married. Like, her mind would go all the way to the extreme. Mm-hmm. And you had to teach me something. You kind of taught me like this kind of pendulum effect. And what I was doing is, and was trained to do my whole life, was if a woman swung more here toward emotionally, you, I would go with that emotion. And then she'd swing even farther. I'd go with that. And then before you know it, you're hooking up or you're doing whatever. And then maybe, in her real heart, that's not what she wants. She just wants to have a connection. Mm-hmm. And so with Sarah, you would be like, hey, listen, man, first of all, this was unique to me, but you'd be like, keep this dial on friendship. And I'm going, dude, I don't want to be in the friend zone. Like, that is literally the last place I want to be. And you're going, no, good Christian girls marry their best friend, and you don't know how to be their best friend. You have to be her friend. Yeah. And I need you to learn how to be stable. if she is having an emotional swing, that's totally fine. It's okay, but you have to stay center. You have to stay consistent. So that way, if she swings this way, you're still here. If she swings this way, you're still here. So she knows that you're safe, that she knows that you're stable in this relationship. That was very strange for me. I'm just being honest. Like, that whole concept was a bit unique, but ultimately super helpful in my marriage, super helpful in our relationship to just say, hey, this is, there's moments as we got closer in our marriage toward getting married that she would swing past boundaries that she had already set. She'd be like, here's the boundaries that I want to have physically. And although they weren't like an extreme physical, we're not going to hook up or anything, but it was just a boundary she really wanted. In that moment, I knew, okay, she's saying this, but really that's not where her heart's at. And so the next day we'd have a conversation. She'd go, hey, thanks for not taking advantage of how I was feeling in that moment, because I probably would have felt bad. Like, the fact that you held that line for me actually made me feel safer. Is that part of like your message to coaching young people through that, is trying to help them figure out what questions are? Also, if you guys DM me courtship, I'll send you guys those questions if you're like me and you just need help on like how to actually get to know a woman. The questions were really helpful, but is that part of it that you teach? Is that kind of like pendulum
the questions,
thing?
like my daughter and son-in-law, who's now our son-in-law, he didn't like them at all. He thought it was very artificial kind of, and
Yeah.
they were having a long-distance relationship, writing letters and stuff. And I said, why don't you go through a couple questions with each letter? And they did, and it was a request. It wasn't like a hard requirement. I just said it might be a good idea just to go look at these, just pick them and go through them. And then the end result for him, he said, when we got married, we knew each other better than some people who had been married for 5 years.
Yeah. Because
we really talked about stuff. We talked, and communication is, for a woman, is super, it creates the connection for them. I think that's super important. And when we participate in that, that's part of it. But, it's not as important for men, but I think it creates that connection for the woman.
Yeah. And it was cool to be able to lead in that and be able to sit down and say, hey, let's talk through these. And then I think you also, but like, why was the pendulum thing so important? And then the other question that we always come up is like, if she was emotionally pulling away, I would take it very personal. And you would just be like, hey man, your job is to like pray with her and give it to the Lord, not take it all and put it on yourself. Like it's your fault that, she's going through this. Like a lot of maybe what she's processing has nothing to do with you. It could be her past, or it could be the fear of, she's getting attached to you.
Maybe
but she's always had rejection and people have left her.
Nothing to do with you at all.
Yeah.
So that's, I think the constancy, I think when a young man starts to pursue a woman, he's kind of pointing the arrow at her circle of life, and things are going on in that circle, but he's saying, I want that circle to move toward me. I'm inviting that person. I'm pursuing them. And that person is in that circle, either moving toward you. The circle's moving toward you, but inside the circle, the person may swing toward you or away from you. And is what you're describing.
Yeah.
And so you're pointing your light, because you've initiated, that arrow is pointing at her circle. It changes everything for her. She's like, all of a sudden someone's interested in her. And there's all these feelings and dreams she's had since she's been a young woman. And she doesn't know what she thinks. 1 minute she's swinging toward you, and what we've seen guys kind of like, well, if the pendulum swings toward you, then you're gonna be very,
You're ready to jump on that because
you're
that's
gonna
what you've
jump on
been
it
waiting
and really
for.
put the pedal to the metal, and
Yeah.
it's going to scare her and make her
Yeah.
feel afraid that it's too quick, too soon. You know, or if she swings away from you, you get depressed and kind of start being moping around and pouting, and instead of being steady, very steady, like a friend, I'm a friend. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm going to be steady.
Is that why you always say,
I'm
Caleb,
pursuing
just you keep the dial on friendship, just stay consistent?
I'm pursuing you, and I just want to be friends. And if you think it's going great and you're really getting, you know, wanting to accelerate this, I'm still just going to be a steady friend. And if you are wondering and you have questions, which you're going to have, it's okay. I'm still here. I'm not running away. I'm just holding steady.
Yeah.
So,
But I think it works even in marriage. It's like I still have to find myself like, hey, I'm her best friend. I still have to figure out what her needs are. And
like
right now her needs are for me to do the dishes and put my clothes in the laundry and not make her life more challenging, and, you know, trying to figure that out. So I just thought it was interesting. If somebody's out there thinking about that, like how helpful it was to be able to have somebody pour into the relationship and not just take it from this concept, but like actual practical steps to being able to walk out a relationship was super helpful, you know? And so I just, you know, I want to thank you for that. And I think the last couple questions I have for you are really just when you look at kind of the state of our nation and you were looking at the young people, like what would be a message you'd want to share with them?
With who?
Just the young people of our nation right now. There's I see a lot of millennials coming back to the Lord. I see a lot of the Gen Z that are on fire for God. Like, what would be something you would say to them?
I think what I want to do is hopefully promise to them there are some older believers that want to be involved in your life and help you grow in your faith, and that we've been praying for you, and we're thrilled to have you come into the kingdom of God, and it's really our dream. I remember I was in the Philippines and kind of a circle of leaders, and they said, Pastor Jim, what's your dream? And I looked at them and I said, you're my dream. You know, you're my dream, to see you hungry for the Lord and coming into the kingdom of God. What else am I living for than to see God do with a generation the same thing he did with me? I mean, it started with me because it happened to me, and I was part of a movement where God moved on us, and our friends, we discovered God, discovered the church, discovered the purpose in life and the kingdom of God, and being part of the extension of the kingdom of God. And now you're embarking on that, and we want you to know you're going to do that. You're not going to have to be alone. We want to do that with you. Our greatest joy is going to be, like Paul said, I have no greater joy than or John wrote that, I have no greater joy than my children walk in truth.
Yeah.
And we want to help facilitate that.
Yeah.
We want to be there for you. We want to be there for you in formation of relationship and marriages, and help you in raising your kids. And we want to share with you the things that we went through ourselves and what we learned and what will be a benefit to you. So you don't have to go through this alone. So you never feel like I'm having to forge this trail all by myself.
Yeah.
I think that's why I want to stay alive as long as I can and be active, and I want the harvest years of my life to be fruitful. And that fruitfulness is not me producing something new or birthing something new. Like, I think it's just sowing into what is happening now, sowing into ministries and structures and that are helping to serve that generation. We can contribute to that. We may not be able to create it, but we'd like to contribute into that.
It's almost like a season of getting away from building into a season of helping the ones that are coming into that season. That's what you're kind of feeling lately, that the Lord's
I
been
think
asking
I'm
you
there.
to. Yeah. Well, you're surrounded by a lot of, even in your own family, a lot of ministries that are just being birthed out of your kids' lives and their spouses, and it's very surreal to watch.
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, yeah. What's one thing you would tell people that are going through like hardship right now? Because there's ups and there's downs, but there's been some stuff that you guys have gone through in the last couple of years that have been pretty challenging and hard. How do you get through the hard times and still stay consistent with the Lord? I mean, even your kids are following in that kind of your footsteps, and they've gone through some stuff, and to see them just still remain consistent with God, it's a question of that.
Yeah, I think it's like when we had a grandson die who was 4 years old. That was 3 years ago. He'd be 7 today, he'd be.
Yeah.
And I remember at his memorial, I said, I'm mourning, and I don't understand this, why this happened, but I'm not going to let this one thing negate everything I've learned about who God is over all the other years of my life. Through all my life of following the Lord, I can't let one thing I don't fully understand negate everything about God that I've learned. I'm not going to let that happen, so my declaration is the Lord's going to be faithful, and He's going to show Himself faithful, and that who He is He's God, and He's not going to negate. These things are not going to negate His character or what. That was my statement at the memorial. I'm not going to curse God for this. And we're going to be honest with the Lord and not quit in that sense, but just, I think the Lord wants the picture of God, of communicating with the Lord I get is, you see it in the Psalms, but you see it in the garden with Jesus, where He's praying and He's saying, Lord, if this cup can pass from me, He's speaking about this suffering that's coming, the cross. In other words, He says, can this cup pass from me? Not my will, but yours be done. Where He's asking the question, is there another way to do this? I don't know if I want to do this, but I'm yielding my will to you, not my will, but yours be done. So there's this honest communication mixed with a statement that I'm going to go with your way and not my way, Lord. And I think people have trouble being honest, or this honest communication with the Lord, and like He can't handle honesty, or He can't handle, we see that with people going through real difficulties, and we want to, if you don't express, I think people feel like there's a certain Christian way to express what we're going through, and I think we want to make room for people to be honest with the Lord, that He can handle that, and there's no appropriate special way to respond to things that are really difficult. And we watched our kids, and we watched, Luke's gone through his stuff with his brain surgery, and we just, our statement in the midst of this difficulty is that God has to be our answer. It's, you read in the Psalms, I sought the Lord and He heard me and delivered me from all my fears. This poor man cried and the Lord heard him and delivered him out of all his troubles. So there's this posture of crying out to God in the middle of crisis. We're a seeking of God and a crying out to God and a turning to the Lord, and that's it. He's our answer in the midst of those things, and we don't know what life's going to give us, but everybody has stuff. Everybody has something.
Yeah.
You talk to anybody, everybody has a bankruptcy or a disease or someone that they love died or a loss. Everybody has something in their heart, in their life that has been hard, a difficult thing that, and we all have opportunity to, in the midst of that, create a pathway to the foot of the cross where we give that thing to the Lord. Like Esther, Esther was a little girl in the Bible that became the queen, but if you know her story, both of her parents died. She became an orphan. It's like, what were her prayers like between the death of her first parent and the death of her second parent? We don't think about what it would be like for a little Hebrew girl to grow up and have a mom and then a dad die, and then she has to go be adopted by some distant relative she doesn't even know. Mordecai, it's like, so you think that we have to take those question marks. Everybody has question marks, like, Lord, we don't know why this happened. And one of the most holy offerings we can make to the Lord is when we take the question marks of our life and we make those a holy offering to God. So like, God, I'm not going to demand an answer from you. I'm not going to curse you because of a question mark in my life. And if you want to answer this question, that's great. If you don't answer, I'm still going to worship you no matter what. I'm not going to hold you hostage with a question mark. I don't have to have if I don't have an answer, I'll carry this question mark. I'll carry it to the cross and lay it at the foot of the cross where that question mark belongs. I'll yield this to you. It's like a holy offering to God is the question marks we have. It's the death, it's the betrayal, it's the divorce, it's the molestation, it's the sexual assault, it's the cancer, it's all those things. And we make a covenant to the Lord. We're going to keep bringing that question mark to the Lord. If he wants to answer, if he wants to turn the question mark into an exclamation mark, he can do that. And sometimes he does that, and we think, whoa, I get it now. I see it. But
Man, that's powerful. You got your book next to you.
Yeah.
You mind sharing a little bit as we wrap up of what the book's about and how they can find it?
We call it Exposing the Cultural Sexual Assault. It talks about the sexual spirit in the culture in the Old Testament, and it's an overview of the sexual spirit, and it's alive today. It's called Unmasked. Exposing what we believe the enemy is loosed us. Like we hear about a sexual assault of one person against another person. It's like the enemy has done a sexual assault against the different generations, trying to sexualize them and bring them into the greatest amount of pain that he can, and with the end that they would not be able to form relationships to create, a marriage and have a relationship that will last. That the whole goal of the enemy, remember, is to weaken the nations. And so it addresses those things. It talks about those things. It's
I want to
a lot of revelation.
Grab that real quick. I want to show the audience real fast. I think what stood out to me the most is this picture right on the front of it. I don't know if you guys can see this. We'll try and post this up. But, man, if that is not the image of my generation.
Yeah, you have the picture
the women that we work
of a lady with the cracks on her face that are symbolic of the condition of her heart.
Yeah.
And then the eye that is saying, I've done everything the culture told me to do. I've done things, I do things I didn't want to do. I've become someone I didn't want to be. I've done everything the culture told me to do. And none of the cultural promises that were made to me have come true.
Yeah.
And somebody lied to me. It's like her eye is saying, somebody lied to me. Somebody lied to me. Like, why?
Yeah.
And the mask is the worst part of it.
Yeah, it's so intense because it's almost like that's
the mask
reality
says,
of it.
Don't you dare talk about the pain or the reality of what you're facing. Just stuff it Just cover up,
Act like everything's okay.
Everything is cool. Nobody else is complaining. If you complain, you're weak or you're unsophisticated or you're unstable.
Yeah.
Because all the other women of the 21st century are involved in sexual relationships without commitment, and it doesn't damage their heart. Everything is fine with them. But they're on antidepressants and they're broken.
So how can they find that book? Is it on Amazon?
Well,
Do you have a
it's
website?
on Amazon. It's in our website also.
Okay. And what's your website?
www.sexualityunmasked.com.
So www.sexualityunmasked.com.
Yeah, sexualityunmasked.com.
And is that how people should find you? Are you actively on
Yeah.
social media, or if somebody wants you to speak, share this message at the church? What's the easiest way to reach you?
That would be the way, just to get on the website and track us down.
Okay. And the website on there has your phone number and has the contact info and stuff like that.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Well, Jim, I want to thank you for coming in, and I want you to thank you for the impact you've had in my life and Sarah's life. And we wanted to get you in here quickly and get you kind of to our audience so that they can hear your story and the wisdom that you have. And I think the biggest thing is just every time I'm around you, it reminds me just like the Father's heart that you have and how important that is. And that the reality is you just want us to win, and you want us to have good marriages, and you want us to be able to have healthy home lives, and that you deeply care. I can't tell you how many times we've been with you and all of a sudden you're on the phone for 2 hours with somebody that's going through some hell, and you take the time out of your day to talk through it with them because you deeply care. And I think that's been the most touching thing, getting to know you. It's, you can preach the paint off the walls. You can really let it go when you're in that place on the church and in the zone. And that's awesome. But I think it's who you are behind closed doors. It's who you are on a day-to-day basis. It's the father you are to your kids. It's the husband you are to your wife. It's every time you showing up consistently. Even when you're like, man, I have this message in my heart and I just want everybody to have the same passion, but I'm still going to continue to move forward and keep pressing on. And I think it's cool to see the fruit of it, and not just in your message or at the altar, but in your kids' lives, and how your message is now continue on with David and King's Church, and now Trevor and his church with Molly. And it's become more of a conversation that I think that's become like a pillar in some of these churches, not just something that comes up once a year. And I know your heart is for every church to have this kind of be a pillar. But I just want to honor you for continuing to press through and continue to keep doing your thing. And it's a real honor to know you, man.
Still going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Still going. How long you been in ministry now?
Oh, I mean, I didn't even count the earlier years where I failed. Those are like the warm-up years, I guess.
You
failure.
Win or you learn. You learned a lot, and you've helped a lot of our leaders through their process too.
Our ministry now that we call Sexuality Unmasked, that was around 1990 we started it.
Wow.
So it's been a while.
Yeah. Pounding the pavement. Getting the message refined.
35 years, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, brother, I love you. Thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thank you. Proud of you.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, I want you to make sure to like and share and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We're grateful for every listener. Your support helps us keep sharing stories of faith, hope, and real transformation. And if this episode encouraged or challenged you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. If you'd like to support victims of sex trafficking and be part of the fight for freedom, visit helpingcaptives.org to learn more. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.